All right, TGIF Friday. We had the call with the arbitrator this morning on his interim award they had issued earlier this week. For those of you who do not know, Arbitrator Ben took two proposals and let the city know that he was going to issue this award, specific to a retention bonus every September 1st of $2,000 to veteran officers with 20 years of service or more, regardless of age. That was one of our proposals in phase 2, and that one, along with arbitration for termination cases instead of just the police board, which is currently the case. He made it very clear that this is an issue that he has addressed previously with many other municipalities around the Chicagoland area, even where the ability to go to arbitration was granted. As such, he was awarding it to us also, as we've been seeking, knowing that the police board, more times than not, does not give a fair shake to our officers. Arbitration is a much more fair process. It's no, just coincidence that the Sun-Times put a hit piece out on arbitration just yesterday, or 2 days ago, should I say. I think it was by design. I'm sure the city has their moles and put forth the piece to try and muddy the waters and make arbitration out to be a bad thing. Arbitration is the union's best friend at this point, not only for interest arbitration when it comes to the contract, but discipline specifically. The Illinois Labor Board issued a complaint against the city 2 days ago, against COPA specifically, and its increase in penalties, which have no explanation, rhyme, or reason, on top of its violation of its own policies on conducting investigations. COPA, as we've highlighted many, many times, has increased penalties that used to be a reprimand, a 1 or a 2 day, 3 day suspension, which are now 30, 45, 60-day suspension recommendations. And there's no justification for it. Arbitrators have upheld the lower penalty in hearings when even those lower recommendations went there. They were either sustained or knocked down to a smaller number. Now, the 800 cases they're going to dismiss because of a backlog, a good thing, but who knows what they're going to do with all of those even. They're going to sustain them and then just rubber stamp them out the door with training requirements attached to it. Nobody knows. I don't even think COPA knows. But back to the original point. The ability for an officer to get a fair shake and discipline comes from the arbitration process. More times than not. It does not come from the police board. It just does not. They have gotten slightly better, but I think that's only because of the reality that they are not going to be the only game in town here very shortly, as it was supposed to be all along. We had no say-so in how this was set up originally, but we've been fighting like hell to try and overturn that provision and allow this to go. And the arbitrator has granted that to us. Now, what does that mean? It means this. We were obligated to come up with language for our proposals that he was granting, and specifically what they would look like going forward. The meeting today was just a conversation about that language, the city's position on it. Because of the holiday weekend, the city requested an extension, a longer extension. Then they kind of receded down to a 4-day extension to exclude the holiday in that 14-day window. So the arbitrator moved his 14-day original window to 18. They have till July 14th to tender language by agreement or their final proposal, along with our language final proposal. If it is not by agreement, he will decide whose final proposal is more reasonable. That will be the award going forward, and that will be sent to the City Council for ratification on the retention bonus along with the arbitration provision, and then we will move on with the rest of the contract from phase 2 that was left behind. On that note, he has set mediation dates for the rest of the contract proposals to be done on August 9th and 10th, with the rest of the schedule to be determined as his openings come forward with scheduling that he has right now. Otherwise, we're going to be waiting a little longer into the year. His calendar's pretty booked, but we expect to get open dates for the rest of the testimony and rebuttal, hopefully done by September, if not sooner. Stay tuned for those dates as they come up. Now, once it gets done on the 14th, it will be sent as an order, whether agreed upon or ordered by the arbitrator, to the City Council for ratification. The City Council then has the ability to approve those two provisions or to deny them. If they reject them, they get sent back to the arbitrator for reconsideration. there is not a logical reason why an arbitrator would then say, I was wrong, let me change the award, unless there was some gross negligence. But I assure you, Arbitrator Ben is extremely thorough, and there will not be any of those situations, which means it will possibly then end up in court if the City Council does not ratify the two provisions and awards that the arbitrator grants going forward. So stay tuned on that. There will be an ability to reach out to your alderman to make sure that those two awards get enacted and approved and adopted as they should. But who knows? NASCAR this weekend. Again, I want to commend the current leadership of this department for at least having conversations and explanations about what they're doing, when they're doing it, and why they're doing it. It's quite refreshing to have a dialogue with leadership that understand that the men and women of this department need to come first. If you don't have buy-in from them, this city is less safe. And I could tell you, Interim Superintendent Waller, the first deputy, the chief of patrol, have been phenomenal in that endeavor about having conversations and explaining to us and me specifically what they plan on doing. So everybody have a safe weekend, the 4th of July. It's going to be a long week, but we'll get through it and we'll move on, and hopefully we get clarity with these situations going forward. I talked about the superintendent. Let's have a little conversation about the Sun-Times article about the 6 finalists. Congratulations to the 5 CPD current officers, command staff that were considered for the final spot. There is definitely a couple issues with some of the 6, I think that are disqualifying. What's disheartening is the story that came out a few days ago about Chief of Patrol Brian McDermott not getting a second interview. We personally find it disgraceful that the selection committee did not choose Brian McDermott for a follow-up interview. Not because we think he should be superintendent necessarily, but he's been the chief of patrol of this department for 3 years in one of the most trying times to be the police, period, full stop. If there is a disqualifying thing in his background because of his service to this city, especially the last 3 years in the position he's held, he deserved the ability to come in front of them and explain what that disqualifying situation or event was. He was never afforded that. Shame on the selection committee for that. It only can be, I guess, interpreted that there was never going to be a white male considered for the superintendent spot. I don't know how else you can look at it. To not give the number 3 guy in this department a fair shake and a second interview to explain himself if you had a problem with something he had done is disgraceful. But onward we go. Now, it's not the only problem with that whole thing. There's one of those candidates who was responsible for one of the most strange cases in CPD history in quite a long time, with the chief of internal affairs niece getting arrested in her car. And that candidate actually made the phone call to order that car to be returned back to the family. And not just returned, delivered. Now, if that doesn't make people wonder what kind of, loyalty that candidate has, if that wasn't a disqualifying incident, I have no idea what Chief McDermott could have done to be disqualified. But to me, that should have been a disqualifying incident for that candidate. Onward we go. Affirmative action. Paul Vallis had it right in his article. I was kind of saving it for today, but he stole a little bit of my thunder. The merit procedure needs to either be changed drastically or abolished. Promoting people because of skin color needs to stop. Recruiting because of skin color needs to stop. It needs to be the best possible candidates that get to wear the badge and gun of Chicago Police Department and serve the men and women of this city, period, and get promoted accordingly. That does not happen. It needs to stop. Sadly, there is many in the upper ranks of this department that have created this problem and this culture of just total lost at sea mentality. Nobody seems to know what they are doing more times than not, because people have gotten over promoted too many times. Once is enough, but 2, 3 times, 3 bites at the merit apple is disgusting. And it shows because of the lack of leadership in many positions throughout this department. So I hope going forward, the new superintendent will take a serious look at the merit promotion and kind of either drastically change it or abolish it altogether like Charlie Beck did when he was here. Onward we go. Parental leave. In conversations today, the mayor clearly does not want his best friends, the teachers union, to have any considerations that he's working collaboratively with the police union, because there is no rhyme or reason why our members have not been afforded the same parental leave act that the teachers got 2 weeks ago now. Plus, other than the fact he is afraid of blowback about being a good mayor, a union mayor. He can't say he's a union man when he's not giving fair, equitable treatment across collective bargaining agreements. We are not asking for anything more than what the teachers just received without even going to the bargaining table. It was gifted, wrapped it to them, and handed to them. And he said it was because the right thing to do. If it was the right thing to do for them, it's the right thing to do for our members. We have had members who have now had children and have not got to spend the last 6 months with them like they should have, like every other city employee was afforded that ability. Shame on that mayor that did that. Shame on this one that continues to do that. It needs to stop. That wrong needs to be corrected as soon as possible. The same can be said for COVID and the whole labor board ruling on COVID for AFSCME and how that should have trickled down to the rest of the city workforce. It should have just been, let's put that chapter behind us. That nightmare of a mayor is gone. Her policy needs to go with it, and we need to move on. Make everybody whole, bring everybody back, and move along. That doesn't seem to be the case that this mayor is going. Again, supposedly pro-union. I don't get it. I haven't seen it. I'll believe it when I do. But this is the party that says they are pro-union. They need to step up and start showing. We are no different than every other union in this city. We will never take a back seat to other unions as if we're some redheaded stepchild. It's not going to happen. We expect to be treated fairly and equally along with every other leader in this city. And that's just the way it needs to be. And I'm not going to stop beating the drum until we get the same considerations everybody else does. If you don't know, Judge Hooks was removed from his post for some vulgar references, which we find quite hilarious in some sense, because complaints about Judge Hooks' behavior, his rhetoric, have been circulating for years, and nobody at 26th and Cale wanted to do anything about it until there was nothing else they could do about it. So now what's going to happen with all the cases Judge Hooks has decided that people have complained were bias? He clearly showed that he had a bias in the article that ran and the reason that he was removed from the bench. But again, everybody just wants to do this. The problem's always over there. When it talks about problems over there, let's talk about the wonderful that I talked about in the river last week. The monuments that this city mayor and city council approved $1 million of city tax dollars to go with the melon money in order to build these monuments. I was doing a little research earlier today, and from 2011 to 2018, there was over 500 sexual abuse allegations for CPS staff, teachers, support staff, whatever the case may be. Investigation revealed that over 200 of those had credible evidence of something that did happen. 200 in a 7-year span. Just last year alone, over 500 allegations of improper behavior, with 25% of those being sexual abuse or sexual in nature. CPS has a definite problem. CTU has a definite problem. Does anybody ever talk about it? Where is the monument for those victims? Does this mayor not care? Because we also know that CTU doesn't care. They want to sweep it under the rug and point the finger at CPD every single time, as if those victims' lives are not changed forever. And those are documented cases, and you could literally see the effect it has had. It is not an allegation of something that supposedly happened so someone can get out of prison. And then not only can someone get out of prison, they can hire an ambulance-chasing law firm like Lovey and Lovey to then sue the city, who's going to roll over, play dead, and give them all the money they want. So then Lovey and Lovey can take their 30% and then donate it to a state's attorneys who is as corrupt as can possibly be, who doesn't want to charge a mother who told her son to execute somebody who was not armed because she was being punched. We're not condoning domestic violence in any way, shape, or form. But how many times have we heard, why did the police shoot that person? They weren't a threat. How was a grown woman being hit by a grown man justification for a 14-year-old executing the guy? Again, let's go back to the Jason Van Dyke, Laquan McDonald shooting. Why did he keep shooting Laquan when he hit the ground, we heard? Well, why did that 14-year-old keep shooting that guy after the first shot in the back when he was no longer a threat and running out of the store? He kept shooting. But yet this state's attorney doesn't want to charge him. And we wonder why the streets are unsafe. There is no accountability. And then that lady, with 24 hours from the charges being dropped, with a smile on her face, and her lawyer talking about suing. Well, we're certainly going to encourage our members to countersue her for defamation because they did nothing wrong. They did the right thing. She was responsible in part for the death of a human being and should have been held accountable because we have a state's attorney who never wants to do her job unless the offender is wearing a badge, or I should say the suspect is wearing a badge. Then it's a whole different dynamic. She can't go soon enough. We have about a year and a half left of the Kim Foxx reign. If this membership and the people who watch this, who support law enforcement, don't understand how much more important that race is than even this mayor's race was, I don't know what to tell you. But the best chance for a civilized society is to make sure a law and order candidate gets elected in the state's attorney's race next November. Everybody have a safe weekend. Be in touch.